r/nosleep. Hosted by you/horror_writer_1717. I worked in a museum of oddities until the oddest thing happened to me. I never wanted this to happen. I didn't want to be standing here, staring horrified at the blood dripping from my hands as people screamed and ran away. It was all my boss's fault. He made this happen. He had plenty of chances to make things right, but there was money to be made. And the love of money is the root of all evil. You know those people who strive for excellence? Who work hard to get the grades because they're destined for better things. They're bound to leave the small town they grew up in, get out there and set the world on fire. I wanted to be one of those people. I studied like my life depended on it for my entire school career. But when it came down to the wire, I missed being valedictorian by 2 points. I didn't get the scholarships or the accolades. I didn't get anything. The only thing I got was an invitation to do a summer internship at the local museum. It was an unpaid internship, but I thought it would look good on an application, so I took the job. When I first started working here, I was terrified. Especially walking in the door for the first time and getting the stare down from an 8-foot-tall Bigfoot statue with arms outstretched and fangs showing in a frozen roar. After I realized what it was and restarted my heart, I was greeted by the owner, Mr. Applebottom. He was a small, thin man with round glasses and a receding hairline. He looked like a stiff breeze would carry him away to the land of Oz. He took me on a tour of the museum, showing me all the attractions. Most of them were cryptids. There were drawings and paintings hanging next to blurry photos of just about any cryptid you can think of. The more popular ones had full-size wax models. All these creatures captured my imagination, but not in a good way. There was also a theater with around 20 seats and a video playing non-stop about sightings of various cryptids. Once he finished the tour, he showed me how to run the cash register and then showed me the janitor's closet. My jobs were to take care of customers during open hours and take care of cleanup during closed hours. After he had shown me everything, he turned the sign from closed to open and told me good luck as he went upstairs to his office. I stood there, frozen, staring at the cash register like it was going to bite my fingers off if I touched it. So my big internship turned out to be a janitor/ticket collector job. I was worried I would get overwhelmed by the rush of customers and have no clue what to do. Fortunately, for me, I didn't have a single customer all day. It turned out the museum had been open for a few years and people had already seen everything there was to see. Repeat customers weren't exactly the museum's forte. I stood there waiting for over an hour. I soon became bored and walked through the gift shop, acquainting myself with the bric-a-brac we sold. That lasted around 15 minutes. To keep myself from falling asleep, I made the mistake of going to the theater and watching the videos of cryptid sightings. As if the wax figures weren't enough, now I had it in my mind that these things not only were real, but could show up at my doorstep anytime they felt like. At the end of the day, Mr. Applebottom came down and asked how many customers we'd had. His face fell when I told him none. He turned the sign from open to closed and told me to do floors. I stared at the floors. "But, you and I are the only ones who walked through here today," I said. "Is this the way you're going to talk to your supervisor?" "No, sir, it just doesn't make sense to me." "Call it a practice run," he said. "I want to see how you do." I sighed and went to the cleaning closet. I vacuumed all the floors, cleaned the TVs, wiped down the counters, and washed the windows. The lights were turned down to night levels, making shadows dance as I did my chores. As I worked my way through the museum, I swore I could feel eyes on me and they weren't Mr. Applebottom's. The statues of the creatures were so lifelike, I didn't dare look up at them for fear they'd grab me and drag me off to their lair. I regretted ever taking this internship. It's only for the summer and it can help you get a better job. That's what I told myself. I just wish I would have quit after that first day. Maybe I wouldn't have. When I was done, he mumbled that I had done satisfactorily and told me to be here bright and early tomorrow. The next day was exactly the same as the first, except I knew what to expect. I brought a book to read so I wouldn't be bored. Of course, it disappeared when the boss was around. I got the feeling he was a, if you can lean, you can clean kind of person. After a few weeks with barely more than a handful of customers, I wondered how he was even able to pay the electric bill. It was no wonder this was an unpaid internship. I'd taken to cleaning in the afternoon so I could be done as soon as he closed up. It was also something to do. Boredom in a hall of monsters can do terrible things to your imagination. One day the boss came down from his office very excited. He told me he had found a new exhibit and it was being shipped in today. It was funny and very encouraging to see him so excited, like a kid waiting at the mailbox for a toy or comic book to arrive. When the delivery man showed up with the package, the boss nearly knocked him over with the door. After he accepted delivery, he stood there, staring at the shoebox-sized package in awe. "What is it?" I said, looking eagerly. He was so focused on it that he whipped around and nearly lost his balance. He composed himself and smiled sheepishly. "That was a close one," he said. Then he straightened. "You shall have to wait until I have the display set up." I frowned as he carried the box up the stairs to his office like some trophy. I shook my head and continued cleaning. An hour later, a frantic Mr. Applebottom raced down the stairs and flew over to me. I'd never seen him run so fast. I cringed, not knowing if he was going to stop in time or plow me over. Fortunately, he stopped just in time. "Where is it?" he said breathlessly. "Where is what?" I said. He looked at me for a long moment. He tried to compose himself and regain control of his breathing. "Have you seen anything out of the ordinary?" he asked with a forced calmness. "No, I've just been cleaning." "And you haven't seen anything unusual?" "No, sir." His eyes scanned the room, with special focus on the floor. He searched the room, then went into theater, finally coming back to me looking defeated. He turned and walked slowly away, shoulders slumped. "Is there anything I can do to help you, sir?" I called after him. He just waved me off and kept walking. I took the vacuum back to the cleaning closet and got out the carpet scrubber to tackle a stain where some kid had spilled soda. I filled the upper tank with soap and water, then went after the stain. I found it interesting that no matter how clean the carpet looked, the water in the collecting tank always looked like chocolate milk when I was done. After 2 run-throughs, I examined the stain and it was much better, but not perfect. This carpet cleaner did a good job, but never seemed to get it 100% clean. I returned the cleaner to the closet and pulled the tank of dirty water out to empty it. As I dumped the water out, something jumped out of it and bit me. I screamed and dropped the tank, recoiling against the wall. Whatever kind of bug it was took off out into the museum. I looked at my bleeding hand, then gathered my courage and followed it. I grabbed a broom off the closet wall and held it out in front of me like a sword. I scanned around the floor of the room but didn't see anything. There weren't even tracks to follow as I passed each exhibit, holding my breath for fear of this thing jumping out at me. Checking around wax figures of monsters didn't help my general anxiety. One by one, I checked each exhibit, paying close attention to the floor around it and behind it. But I came up short. As I started back through for a second search, Mr. Applebottom rounded the corner and scared me nearly half to death. I swung my broom only to realize just in time who it was. "What's going on?" he said, holding up his arm to defend against a woman brandishing a broom. "I'm sorry, sir," I said. "I heard noises and thought there was an intruder." "Oh," he said, composing himself. "Glad to see you defending the interests of the museum." "Yes, sir." "How did you injure yourself, Miss Primrose?" he said, looking at my bloody hand. I stared at it for a moment. Should I tell him something bit me and ran away? Should I let him know there's something dangerous roaming around? Or will he blame me for not finding it? Would he fire me? God knows if anything happened to a guest because of me. I must have cut it in my haste to grab the broom, I lied. "Oh, well, best tend to that," he said. "Don't want you bleeding on the floors." "Yes, sir." "Carry on then," he said. "I'm leaving for the night. You'll lock up on your way out, won't you?" "Of course, sir." With that, he turned on his heels and headed for the front door. I watched him go, then turned back to the now empty building. All that was here was me and the little monster that had bit me. I panned around the room feeling more alone than I had in a long time. I slowly made my way back to the cleaning closet, holding my broom tightly. When I got there, I leaned my broom against the wall next to the first aid box hanging on the wall. As I got a bandage out and covered my wound, my eyes kept darting to the door. When I was done, I picked up the broom and carried it to the edge of the doorway. I scanned the empty room searching for my attacker. The deserted floor mocked me, like it was a field of landmines waiting for me to step on one. I wished I had some sort of sci-fi goggles that could scan for life forms like in the movies. But I was on my own. I took a deep breath and started for the door, holding my broom to defend myself. At first, I walked toward the door, eyes darting all around, but as the door came closer, I stepped more quickly. It didn't help that I had to pass one monster after another. Until I got to the door, I was at a full run. I slammed into the door in a full panic, pulling the keys out of my pocket and dropping them like in every horror movie. Sweat poured off my forehead, making the keys slip out of my hand a second time. Finally, I got the keys in the lock and opened the door only to whip around and try to slam it shut. But it refused to close. It was as if the building was saying, "Oh no, you don't. You get back in here and deal with this thing." I slammed the door over and over, but it refused to shut. I looked around in a sheer panic when I saw a piece of wood sticking out of the door. I bent down and picked it up. It was the broom. I threw it back inside and slammed the door shut, locking it and breathing hard as I leaned against it, trying to compose myself. The longer I leaned against the door, the more my breathing slowed. The more my breathing slowed, the more my mind told me how foolish I had been. It was just a bug, I thought. Nothing to get excited about. I wanted to tell my mind that it was full of baloney. I wanted to believe it was just a bug. But something wouldn't let me. Some small niggling feeling wouldn't allow me to simply dismiss it. I went home and tried my best to forget about the events of the day. I made myself a microwave dinner, meatloaf with mashed potatoes and corn, then laid in bed laughing my head off to whose line is it anyway until I fell asleep. There were ants crawling all over me. No, not over me, through me. I could feel them under my skin. I looked down at my arm and saw them moving around, hundreds of them, like there were highways full of ants moving up and down beneath my skin. I scratched until I dug the skin open, trying to yank the ants out of my body one at a time. I grabbed one and pulled it out of my arm. I looked at it and to my surprise it looked like a miniature version of the thing that bit me. I tried to squash it, but it didn't seem to faze the creature. It got tired of me trying though and bit me. Again. I threw it to the floor and stomped on it. It looked at me then just skittered away, unharmed. The rest of me felt like I was being slowly devoured. Pain shot from every inch of my body as these creatures dug deeper into me, reaching my bloodstream. It carried them all through me, causing even more havoc. I desperately tore at my skin, scratching, digging, tearing with my nails. Anything to get these little monsters out of me. I didn't care about the blood running down my arms and seeping into my bedsheets. I just wanted to be rid of this torture. They were relentless. I could feel every molecule they invaded. The pain was beyond description. I was about to go completely insane if I didn't. I sat bolt upright in bed and screamed. I felt my arms, my legs, my face, searching for the tiny invaders that had destroyed my body. But they weren't there. I looked down at my arms, relieved to not see tiny creatures roaming under my skin and blood where I had torn the skin away trying to dig them out. However, I did see something disturbing. I had a rash. It ran all the way up my arms and disappeared under my sleeves. I threw off my sweaty sheets and ran to the bathroom. I turned on the light and wished I hadn't. The person who greeted me in the mirror was a stranger. Red blotches ran all up and down my body. Even my face was covered in them. Had I scratched myself in my sleep? I examined the blotches more closely. They didn't appear to be scratch marks. In fact, they weren't itchy. That in itself seemed odd. Not that I wasn't grateful that whatever this rash was that covered most of my body didn't itch. It was just unique. I'd never heard of a rash that didn't itch at least a little. As if on cue, I started scratching. As soon as I scratched the first spot, everywhere else began to itch at the same time. I watched in the mirror as my nails tried to reach everywhere at once and failed miserably. I had to do something quickly before I scratched myself apart like in my dream. I ran a hot shower and jumped in, clothes and all. I stripped in the shower, revealing even more red splotches. The water seemed to have a soothing effect on the itching, and soon I wasn't scratching at all. I plugged the tub and ran water in, settling in for a bath. Relief washed over me as the water covered my skin. I was left with the obvious question. What the hell is this? As I looked around, I noticed the spot where I'd been bitten was swollen. I examined it carefully. I'd never seen a reaction like this before. Was this like a bee allergy? Was my throat about to swell shut? I swallowed just to be sure I still could. It went off without a hitch. It didn't even hurt. So what was going on with the rest of me? I needed to figure this out, but a hospital was the last resort. So-called medical professionals have proven themselves to be untrustworthy as of late. I would probably end up being dissected in the name of medical science. I got out of the tub, dried off and put on a bathrobe. Next, I camped out in front of my computer searching for anything even remotely like this. Several hours later I was startled awake by my alarm clock. I got up and turned it off, then went to the bathroom to check my rash status. It was still there. In fact, it seemed to be getting worse. I decided that work was the last place I wanted to be while dealing with this. What's wrong with your face? I could hear children saying over and over. Having to patiently admit that I don't have a single clue, repeatedly during the course of a day held no appeal to me. I called the boss and told him I wasn't feeling well. I could hear him practically go into convulsions at the thought of me calling off. How bad is it, really? He said. Can't you come in and just take it easy? I don't think so. I don't allow you to call off, he said, trying to assert himself. Well, I won't be there today, with or without your permission. I could almost hear his little head boiling like a cartoon tea kettle, about to blow. If you call off, you're fired, he said, thinking he had fired the killing blow. Okay, and that'll solve your problem of having no assistant, how? He sputtered and chuffed, and made sounds I couldn't even identify. I was about to ask if he was having a stroke, when he suddenly regained control. We have the school children's tour today, he said. How will I do tours and run the counter at the same time? Damn it. I forgot about the tour. I sighed deeply. Okay, I'll be in, I said. Under 2 conditions. Name them. First, I don't do the tour, I said. I'll run the concessions and ticket sales. But. Deal's off, I said. Okay, I'll do the tours, he said, sounding quite exasperated. What's your other demand? No questions about my medical condition. He hesitated. Or I could hang up right now. No, he said quickly, then cleared his throat. I agree to your terms. Great, I thought sarcastically. I was hoping he'd refuse. I sighed heavily. I'll be in. He hung up the phone. Presumably before I could change my mind. An hour later I unlocked the door and walked in. We're not open yet, Mr. Applebottom said. I don't know how you got in here, but you'll have to leave until regular business hours. That's fine with me, I said. I didn't want to be here anyway. He paused and took a closer look at me. To be fair, there wasn't much to look at. I was wearing a long sleeve shirt even though it was supposed to be in the 80s today. I had gloves on as well as sunglasses and a hat. I looked like a movie star trying to be incognito. Oh my goodness, Miss Primrose? It is you under all that. New condition, don't mention the outfit. He put his hands up in playful surrender. So, if I may ask, when did all this start? I sighed. Yesterday, I was cleaning and this bug bit me. You say a bug bit you? I nodded. And it caused all this? I'm fairly sure. I know I didn't eat any shellfish yesterday. Could you describe this bug? He said slowly. It was small, it kinda reminded me of a scorpion, but different. Honestly, it happened so fast I didn't get a good look at it. He stared off into space. I'll be back, he said, his eyes glazed. Okay, I'll start getting ready for the morning. You do that, he said without looking back. I watched him go. He reminded me of a zombie, just slow and listless. I shook it off and started preparing for the day. The tour went smoothly and the day was less eventful than I imagined it would be. I only had 3 kids stare at me the whole day. I said, boo, to 2 of them when their parents were looking the other way. They jumped and ran away. Mr. Applebottom kept checking on me. It seemed nice at first, but there seemed to be more to it. He kept stealing glances at me. It was getting a little creepy. I wanted to ask him what was wrong. All through the day workmen came in carrying all kinds of construction equipment and pieces of metal. What's going on? I asked Mr. Applebottom. They're setting up our new exhibit, he said excitedly. I didn't know we were getting a new exhibit. It's very exciting, he said. Let me show you. I followed him to a large storage room that had been cleared out, where a solid metal cage had been constructed. That's impressive, I said, admiring the gleaming metal. When will the creature arrive? Soon, it should be here within the next day or 2. And it's live, not a statue? Our first live exhibit, he said, so excited he was dancing on his tiptoes. Would you like to see the inside? I shrugged and followed him around to the back of the cage. He stepped inside and I followed. It seemed like the animal would be comfortable. There were pillows disguised as rocks all around. In the corner was a nest that was a mattress disguised as a slab of stone. I sat on it and chuckled at how soft it was. Just then I heard the cage door slam shut. I jumped up and ran to it. Mr. Applebottom was standing on the other side. Very funny, I said. You've caged me, now what are you gonna do with me? Wait, he said, then walked away. I banged on the cage. This isn't funny, I yelled. Let me out of here. I banged and carried on for a little while, then slowly walked a lap around the inside perimeter of the cage. There was what looked like a freshwater stream, fed by a spring. I took a closer look and found the PVC pipe that was hidden from visitors' eyes. It fed into a plastic pool that was decorated to look like rock. They definitely went all out to create the illusion of wilderness. After a few laps around, with some more cage banging thrown in for good measure, I sat on the slab rock bed and wondered what had possessed Mr. Applebottom to pull such a cruel joke. I'd been a good employee, or at least I thought I was. What if it's not a joke? My mind said. What if it's some sadistic torment? But why? I thought. Mr. Applebottom is a kind man and a respected businessman. As far as you know. What does that mean? You have no idea what he's like in private. Maybe he's some weirdo, whack job, sadist, that gets off by locking people up and pretending they're animals. That's a bit of a stretch, don't you think? Are you sitting in a cage? Yes, but. Did he put you there? Well, yes, but. Have you been a bad girl? Stop that. I'm sure it's nothing like that. He just. Just what? Just went crazy and locked me in a cage. How the hell should I know? You ever watch those crime shows on TV where the perpetrator was always the quiet sort no one would ever suspect of killing his neighbors and grinding up their bones to bake into cakes that he donated for bake sales? That's sick. That's what Mrs. Jones said when he invited her over and turned her into a bundt cake. You were just making this up to scare me. If that's what you want to believe. I'm tired. I'm gonna lay down on my nice soft rock and go to sleep. Pleasant dreams. I sighed and laid down on the surprisingly comfortable fake rock, trying to imagine when and why Mr. Applebottom had gone crazy. I pulled out my phone and stared at it. I didn't want to call the police and raise a fuss only to find out it really was a joke. I started typing what had happened at this point. Maybe I could send it to myself and have a good laugh about it when things got cleared up. I woke up feeling stiff and sore. I guess laying on something that isn't my own bed had its consequences, no matter how comfortable it was. For the first time, I realized a design flaw in the cage setup. I didn't see a bathroom. I did a full lap around searching and found something disturbing. There was a small door in the corner and a tray of food had been set inside. Right beside it was a bucket. Oh, I don't think so. I did another lap to make sure there was nothing I had missed. There wasn't. I started to feel uncomfortable. Not only did I have to pee, but this entire scenario was getting out of hand. The joke was over. I'd had enough. I got my phone and held it to my face to unlock it, but it wouldn't unlock. I tried again, but it refused. I went to type in my password but was distracted when I saw my thumb. The rash was gone, but in its place were layers of something that looked like scales. I stared at it with morbid fascination. I flexed it and moved it around, then pulled my sleeve up. To my horror, the rash on my arm had been replaced with scales as well. I panicked, pulling up my pant legs, to find even more scales. I tried to pull off my shirt, but it kept getting caught. I pulled harder and harder until the shirt began to rip. I was determined at this point and continued ripping until the shirt finally came off. I stared down at a belly full of scales just below my bra that was also hiding scales. I screamed, terrified of this demonic possession that had overtaken my body. But even my scream was unfamiliar. My voice had changed. It was deeper and had a different quality to it. No, I cried out. But my voice only roared. It can't be, I said, but only guttural groans emerged from me. I unlocked my phone with the password and called 911. 911, what's your emergency? The operator said. Help me, I'm being held hostage in a cage inside the museum, I said. I'm sorry, could you turn down the TV? All I could hear was animal sounds. I'm not watching TV, this is me talking, can you please send help? If this is a prank call you could get criminal charges. It's not a prank call, I roared. Last chance, either talk to me or I'm hanging up. But I'm trying to talk. The line went dead. To you. I stared at the phone. How can I get a message out if I can't talk? I looked through the options on the phone when it hit me. Text to speech, of course. I called the police again, then started typing like mad. Hello, I'm the one who just called, I typed, hearing the electronic voice say the words for me. The one who had the TV up too loud? I wanted to say it wasn't the TV, that it was my voice that somehow won't work. But I figured that would be the quickest way for her to hang up again. Yes, that was me. What's your emergency? I am trapped in the museum. My employer locked me in a cage. Are you in any danger? I looked around the cage. Not at the moment. Are you injured? I looked at the scales on my arm. No. Okay, we'll have someone there shortly, you hold on, okay. I nodded my acknowledgement, not realizing she couldn't hear it. Yes, I will hang on until you arrive, the mechanical voice said. The line disconnected. I did a fist pump in celebration. I started pacing, I was so excited to be rescued. The next 10 minutes were the longest of my life. Finally, I heard voices. They were coming toward me. The door opened and in walked Mr. Applebottom with an officer. "Help me!" I screamed. "He's holding me hostage." The officer stepped up to the cage, then turned to Mr. Applebottom. I smiled in anticipation of seeing him led away in cuffs. "I see what you mean," the officer said to him. "It really doesn't like you very much." "Well, we only just got it in yesterday," he said. "She needs a little time to adjust to things." "She?" the officer said, looking at me. "Oh, yeah, I guess it is a she." I covered my breasts, not even thinking about the fact that they were covered with scales. He laughed. "I see she understands perfectly well." "Yes, sometimes a little too well. I'm going to have to keep a close eye on her to make sure she stays where she belongs." "So my question is, how did she manage to get a phone and call us in the first place?" "I had an assistant who wasn't very careful, and let's just say she won't get too close to the cage again." "Got a hold of her, eh?" "You could say that." "You gonna try to get that phone back?" "Would you?" He looked me up and down. I pleaded one last time for him to save me. It only came out as a growl. "Nope, I think I'd leave it right where it is. The battery is sure to die soon, unless you charge it up for her. What are the odds of that happening?" He looked me in the eye. "0, he said. "That's what I thought. You have a nice night now, and we'll just block that number for the moment. Let us know if you get it back or it dies." "I surely will. You have a good trip back, officer," he said. Once he was gone and the door was locked, Mr. Applebottom came back and stood just out of reach beside the cage. He held out his hand. I reached for it, but he pulled it back. "No, give me the phone," he said. I shook my head. "Give it to me." I stepped back and shook my head. "All right, keep it," he said. "It'll be useless soon anyways." I started typing and hit the play button. "What happened to me?" the mechanical voice said through my phone. "You have been transformed into another species." I typed. "No shit, Sherlock, how and why?" I had ordered a creature that I had hoped would be the star attraction of the museum. However, when it arrived I realized that it was too small to be a main attraction. That plus it doesn't look that distinctive. It could easily be mistaken for a scorpion. As I was transferring it to its new cage, it escaped. And found me. Yes, I was quite unaware that a bite would cause such a transformation. However, here you are, my new star attraction. I don't want to be. I do apologize for the inconvenience, but the transformation is quite irreversible. Inconvenience? I typed, then picked up a real boulder and threw it at the cage. He ducked and covered his head as it hit the bars and shattered into a million pieces. He squealed in pain as the small rocks hit him like a shotgun blast. He ran to the door and stood behind it, peeking his head inside. "Make sure to get plenty of rest," he said. "Tomorrow is your grand reveal. I need to get the word out, and I need to hire a new assistant." Fuck. My phone began to say, but the sound was overwhelmed by me throwing another boulder at the bars. He dove out the door and slammed it shut just before the rocks hit him. I collapsed to my knees under the sheer weight of my life being taken from me. My eyes burned. I wasn't sure if this was some new aspect of transformation or just my tears. I looked down at my mutilated, monstrous hands. My phone was still in one of them. I reached back to hurl it at the bars as well when I noticed my cell reception. I had 4 bars. I still had internet. My battery was still half full. I began desperately typing my story. When I was done, I found a website that dealt with cryptids and unexplained phenomenon. If you're reading this, please help me. I'm at the Museum of Oddities in Frost Creek. I'll keep posting until my phone dies. Mr. Applebottom was true to his word. People flocked in today, walking past my cage and staring. I considered throwing rocks at them. Maybe a few injuries would make them go away. But then I saw all the little kids and thought better of it. I decided to take a different path to show my protest. I laid on my fake rock with my back to the people and refused to move. It didn't take long for the complaints to bring him back to my cage. "What are you doing?" he said through gritted teeth. I typed on my phone, "Nothing. Absolutely nothing." "Wrong, you're embarrassing me," he hissed, grabbing the bars for effect. "Now get up and give them a SH." I moved like a flash. My hand grabbed his and held him like a vice. I pulled him close. He was smashed against the bars. Please, don't." I grabbed the top of his head and turned it around in a full circle, enjoying the satisfying cracks of his vertebrae snapping. I pulled up and his head came off, showering me in blood. I stared into his face with a look of shock permanently frozen on it. The people in the room began to scream and run away. I stared at the dead body that was only upright because I was holding it. I looked back and forth between the head in one hand and the body in the other. I dropped them both and stared in horror as they hit the floor. Blood poured out onto the floor. I watched with morbid fascination as a bug skittered over and began darting its tongue out, licking up the blood. As I watched, I saw it was the same bug that had infected me and turned me into this horrible monster. I reached out through the bars towards it. It paused and looked up at me. I could almost see it make the connection between us. That it had been responsible for me. That we shared a kind of kinship, a bond that could barely be fathomed. It reached an appendage out towards me as well. I smashed my hand down, splattering blood everywhere and crushing the thing that had destroyed my life. I withdrew my hand and stared at the flattened creature laying in the blood of my boss. The two entities most responsible for this hideous transformation. I trudged over to my fake rock and plopped on it. I opened my phone, saw the battery indicator was flashing, and made this last entry. I will escape this cage. I will find where the creature came from. I will find a way to change back to my human form. And I pity anyone who stands in my way.